The aliens arrived without warning, their sleek warships descending from the void like silent predators. The night sky burned with the glow of their engines as they positioned themselves over Earth's major cities. They did not come in peace. Within hours of their arrival, entire cities were reduced to rubble. Their first attacks were brutal, coordinated strikes against humanity's greatest military installations, reducing fortresses of defense to little more than craters in the ground. Their weapons were beyond anything humans had ever encountered: plasma cannons that melted steel, energy waves that tore through the very fabric of matter, and robotic foot soldiers that advanced with unwavering precision. The first hours of the invasion were the darkest in human history. Governments scrambled to respond, sending desperate messages of diplomacy, but the invaders answered only with more destruction. They did not see humans as a worthy adversary. To them, Earth was just another conquest, a planet to be stripped of its inhabitants and claimed for their own. The world's militaries fought back with everything they had. Fighter jets soared into the skies, launching missile barrages at the enemy ships, but the alien vessels moved with unnatural agility, dodging human weapons with ease. Nuclear warheads were launched in a desperate bid to even the odds, but their energy shields absorbed the blasts as if they were mere firecrackers. The invaders continued their assault and challenge, carving through Earth's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Cities that had stood for centuries fell in mere hours, leaving behind only smoldering ruins. The death toll was unimaginable. Millions perished before the world even had time to comprehend the scale of the destruction. But as the world reeled, something began to stir. The aliens had assumed humanity would crumble under their might, that fear and devastation would lead to swift surrender. What they failed to understand was that humans had been fighting wars for as long as they had existed. They had endured plagues, natural disasters, and conflicts that had pushed them to the brink of annihilation before. This was not the first time humanity had faced extinction, and it would not be the last. The invaders wanted war, but they did not realize they had just awakened something far deadlier than they could have imagined. In hidden bunkers beneath the ruins of fallen cities, world leaders, military strategists, and scientists gathered. They had no illusions about the situation. Earth's defenses had been shattered, their weapons were ineffective, and their forces were outmatched. But surrender was never an option. Plans were drawn, countermeasures devised, and a new kind of warfare was born, when that would use not just brute force, but the very essence of human ingenuity. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage operations, and technological adaptation would become humanity's greatest weapons. The enemy had superior firepower, but humans had something far greater: the ability to adapt, to think beyond conventional warfare, and to fight with an unyielding determination born of desperation and survival. The resistance began in small, isolated pockets. In the ruins of New York, a group of survivors, alien wreckage into makeshift weapons, launching surprise attacks on enemy patrols. In the mountains of Eastern Europe, an underground base was established where human scientists worked tirelessly to alien technology, searching for a weakness. Across Asia, military remnants coordinated strikes, forcing the invaders to spread their forces thin. Communication networks, once thought destroyed, were re-established through old radio frequencies, linking survivors and soldiers across the globe. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, but they were no longer defenseless. They had begun to fight back. As the days turned into weeks, the war changed. The aliens had not expected resistance on this scale. They had thought humanity would be crushed within days, yet they found themselves engaged in a prolonged conflict they were for. For the first time, cracks appeared in their seemingly invincible strategy. Their soldiers, once unstoppable, found themselves ambushed at every turn. Their supply chains were targeted, their war machines dismantled piece by piece. What had once been a calculated extermination had turned into a war of attrition. The invaders wanted war. Humanity had given it to them. Survivors of the first attacks refused to surrender. In hidden bunkers, war rooms, and underground laboratories, humanity prepared for a counter-strike. Military forces, though battered, began organizing resistance cells. Scientists worked around the clock, analyzing alien technology, looking for weaknesses. Engineers salvaged enemy weapons, creating hybrid war machines. Civilians took up arms, training themselves in guerrilla tactics that would make Earth an uninhabitable battlefield for the invaders. The first coordinated attacks against the aliens were small, surgical strikes against their supply lines and command centers. But these victories grew. Every fallen human fighter was replaced by 10 more willing to take up the cause. Humanity was not just defending its home, it was turning the war into a fight the aliens had never prepared for. The turning point came when resistance forces in South America successfully ambushed an alien resource outpost, capturing not only weapons but also an entire squadron of enemy drones. With these, engineers uncovered the method behind their communications, exposing a weakness that had been overlooked. The aliens relied on centralized command hubs to coordinate their fleet movements. By disrupting these signals, human forces could throw entire enemy formations into chaos. Word of this discovery spread, and soon, resistance cells across the world began launching attacks on these hubs, crippling the alien war machine from within. Despite their technological superiority, the invaders struggled against the unpredictability of human warfare. They were accustomed to overwhelming their opponents with brute force, but humanity was different. The war was no longer being fought in open battlefields, it had moved to the shadows, to the ruins of fallen cities, where every alley and every structure was a potential trap. The invaders soon realized that every step forward came at an unbearable cost. In the ruins of Tokyo, resistance fighters lured enemy patrols into collapsing skyscrapers, burying them beneath tons of debris. In the deserts of North Africa, human snipers picked off alien commandants with ruthless efficiency. The war was no longer just survival, it was a calculated effort to break the invaders from within. The resistance was not limited to soldiers alone. Engineers, alien technology, creating plasma grenades, and portable EMP devices that disrupted enemy shields. Hackers infiltrated alien networks, rewriting targeting systems so that enemy drones turned on their own forces. Biologists studied alien physiology, crafting, from Earth's most resilient viruses that the invaders had no immunity against. Humanity had always been a species of innovators, and now with extinction at their doorstep, they proved more ingenious than ever. As the battle raged on, human forces adapted to the enemy's tactics at a rate that shocked even the most optimistic strategists. They devised countermeasures faster than the aliens could adjust, forcing them into defensive positions for the first time since the invasion had begun. This shift in momentum was further cemented when resistance forces successfully captured an alien warship intact. Scientists wasted no time dissecting its systems, its weapons, and understanding the invaders' power sources. Within weeks, the first alien warships were seen in the skies, fighting back against the invaders with their own technology. For the first time, the enemy realized they were not only losing ground but also losing control of the battlefield. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had transformed into something far more. Humanity was no longer fighting to defend itself, it was taking the war to the enemy. The message was clear. The invaders had come seeking conquest, but now they were facing an opponent that refused to bow, refused to break. They had expected an easy victory, but instead, they had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished. The war was no longer just about reclaiming Earth. It was about proving that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, a species that would not only survive but rise stronger than before. The resistance had begun as a fight for survival, but now it was a fight for dominance. What began as a desperate resistance soon became a counteroffensive. Human scientists cracked the alien encryption, disrupting their communications and turning their weapons against them. The first enemy mothership fell when an elite strike team infiltrated its core and detonated its power systems from within. The invaders, once so sure of their superiority, began retreating from key territories. For every human city they destroyed, they lost an entire fleet. The tide had turned, and the war they had initiated was slipping from their control. Humanity's adaptability, their raw will to fight, and their ability to learn from the enemy had transformed them into something the aliens had never expected: the hunters instead of the hunted. In every war zone across the planet, the battles intensified. With control of alien communication channels, resistance forces launched synchronized attacks, severing the supply lines that kept the enemy forces operational. The alien war machines, once an unstoppable force, now lay abandoned on battlefields, their energy cores drained, their pilots either captured or eliminated. Resistance legions, who had once fought in hiding, now stood on the front lines, rallying their troops in broad daylight. Humanity had become the storm, and for the first time, the invaders had no answers. The moment that truly changed the course of the war came when human engineers successfully the alien warp drive. Up until this point, humanity had been fighting a defensive war, limited to the confines of Earth. But now, with access to interstellar travel, they were no longer bound to their home planet. Resistance forces, now armed with stolen alien warships, launched attacks on the invaders' forward bases in deep space. It was a stunning reversal of power. The species that had once been marked for extinction was now on the offensive, taking the fight beyond their own skies and into the void. The aliens, once thought to be invincible, were now experiencing something they had never faced before: fear. Their tactics had been designed for swift, overwhelming conquest, but humanity had proven to be an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. They fought with relentless determination, turning every setback into an opportunity. Where the aliens relied on superior technology, humans adapted, improvised, and outmaneuvered them at every turn. No matter how much destruction the invaders brought, humanity responded with tenacity and sheer force of will. As the war continued, it became clear that the invaders were running out of options. Their forces were stretched thin, their weapons were being used against them, and their dominance was crumbling. More and more of their ships were abandoning battlefields, retreating to the outer edges of the solar system in search of refuge. But humanity was not done. They had suffered too much, lost too many, and they were not about to let the enemy escape without consequence. The final push came when a coalition of human forces tracked the enemy's primary command fleet to a hidden base orbiting a distant moon. This was their last bastion, their final attempt to regroup and strategize. Humanity knew that if they could crush the command structure of the invasion force, the war would be won. A massive fleet of hybrid ships piloted by the very people the invaders had once sought to exterminate surged toward the enemy's stronghold. The ensuing battle was unlike any the universe had ever seen. Alien warships, once symbols of terror, were torn apart in coordinated strikes. The enemy's defenses, once impenetrable, were overwhelmed in mere hours. The final bastion of the invaders fell, not to superior firepower, but to the unbreakable resolve of a species that refused to kneel. By the time the battle was over, the war had been decided. The invaders, who had once sought to erase humanity, were now fleeing the system in disgrace. They had come seeking war, but they had found something else entirely. They had found an enemy that could not be conquered. And as the last of their ships disappeared into the darkness of space, when truth became clear, humanity had not just survived, they had won. With their forces in disarray, the invaders tried to broker peace. But humanity remembered the cities they had razed, the lives they had stolen. There would be no surrender. In one final coordinated strike, the last remnants of the alien fleet were crushed. Humanity chased them back into the void, making sure they never returned. A single message was broadcast across the stars, a warning to any who would dare challenge Earth again. You came seeking war. We gave you one. You will never return. The war was over, but the galaxy would never forget the lesson that had been burned into history. Humans were not to be underestimated, and Earth was never to be conquered. The final battle was fought not in desperation but in vengeance. Every weapon, every ship, every soldier carried the fury of a species that had been pushed to the brink and had clawed its way back. Human forces, now armed with the best of both their own technology and that which they had taken from the invaders, launched simultaneous attacks on all known enemy positions. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to make sure the aliens knew what it meant to provoke humanity. Across the solar system, enemy strongholds were obliterated, their command ships reduced to floating debris, their war engines shattered beyond repair. The alien fleet, which had descended upon Earth with overwhelming force, was now little more than wreckage drifting lifelessly in space. Even as the last enemy ships tried to escape, humanity pursued them. There would be no safe haven, no place for them to regroup. The hunters had become the hunted, and the survivors of the invasion were shown no mercy. The few alien vessels that managed to enter warp space did so with the knowledge that they had lost not just a battle, but their very dominance in the galaxy. They had sought to make Earth their prize, but instead, they had ensured their own downfall. The warning was clear: any species that considered humanity weak, that thought Earth was an easy target, would suffer the same fate. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time. With the war won, the focus shifted to rebuilding, but it was clear that the world would never be the same again. Earth had been changed by the invasion, not just physically, but psychologically. What had once been a divided planet, full of nations and politics and conflicts of its own making, was now unified in a way no one had thought possible. The war had forged an unbreakable alliance between its people. No longer separate nations but a singular force, humanity had become something new, something stronger. They had not only defended their home but had claimed their place in the stars. The captured alien technology provided the foundation for a new era. Human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, expanding their understanding of weaponry, travel, and advanced AI systems that had once belonged to the enemy. Earth was no longer just a planet, it was now the capital of a force that would extend beyond the solar system. The first expeditionary fleets were already being assembled, not for conquest, but for vigilance. Humanity had learned the hard way that survival meant never waiting for the next threat to arrive. Instead, they would be the ones watching, the ones preparing, ensuring that no species ever dared set its sights on Earth again. And so, as the first fleet left a orbit, carrying the message of humanity's victory to the furthest reaches of space, when truth remained undeniable. The aliens had come for war, but it was humanity who had truly mastered it. They had given their enemies exactly what they had asked for and more. The war had not broken them. It had forged them into something unstoppable. Earth was no longer just a home, it was a fortress, and its people were its guardians. The universe would never look at humanity the same way again. They were not just survivors. They were warriors. And they were ready for whatever came next.